In this video, we are going to focus on the two concepts of equality and equity. We will focus mainly in 4 points. Point number 1, we'll talk about the definition of equality and a definition of equity and how these two concepts are confused, or some people think that they can be used interchangeably. The second point, we'll talk about how equality and equity are affected as two concepts by ethics, particularly the ethics that we are discussed in this course: the ethic of justice, the ethic of care, the ethic of profession, and the ethic of critique. We'll also talk about best practices that are displayed in the classroom in terms of equality and equity. And the last thing, we'll talk about a book for children that teaches the concepts of equality and equity, or just one of them. First of all, let's talk about the definition of these two concepts and how they are confused. We have to stress and confirm that they are different. These two words are different. They stand for two completely different things. Perhaps the source of confusion is because these two words share the same root. The root here is AEQU, which means same or even. But not all words that share the same root should be judged to be similar in meaning. For example, if you look at the words generate and general, it's obvious here that both of them share the root gen, but of course generate as a verb means to produce, and general as an adjective, it has nothing to do with production or reproduction. It just means common and not specific. The same thing for the two words form and formal. It's obvious here that they share the same root, F-O-R-M, but form is a document or something that you fill in, and formal, the opposite informal, refers to something completely different, like respecting, ceremonial, or abiding by certain standards and formalities. The two words canon and canon, I mean C-A-N-N-O-N and C-A-N-O-N. Again, they are similar, and even in spelling, except for this one letter, but it doesn't mean that they should have the same meaning. One of them refers to a kind of weapon, and the other, which is C-A-N-O-N, not double N, I mean, it refers to a code or a law. The two words terminal and terminology, they share the same root again, but they do not have the same meaning. The root they share is T-E-R-M, but terminal refers to something that is final, the end of something. I mean, terminology refers to a collection of words or some sort of jargon that is specific or associated with a certain field, like, for example, medical terminology, psychological terminology, pedagogical terminology, and even in our course we can also say ethical terminology. So what we learned from all these examples, that if two words or more than two words share the same root, they do not necessarily have to have the same meaning. And this is the case with equity and equality. Sometimes actually words that seem to be opposite could not be opposite. A word like flammable or inflammable, it's interesting that both of them have the same meaning, and both of them mean, causing fire. Or the word valuable and invaluable, again, on face value, they look like they are opposites, but they are not. In fact, they both have the same meaning, which means which is very synonymous with the word priceless, which on face value, again, priceless looks like it's without price, but actually priceless means very valuable or quite invaluable. So from all these examples, we should learn that when words, or in some words, share the same meaning, they do not necessarily, the same root, they do not necessarily have to have the same meaning. In simple words and in short, equality means sameness. Like the equality means the quality of being even or the same. But equity, it means the quality of being fair. To best explain the difference between them, we can look at this image. If we look at this image here, we have three different people of three different heights. We have a tall person, a person of average height, and a short one, or like we have a grown-up, like a man, and a teenager maybe, and a child. and all of them stand next to a wall or a fence that stands as an obstacle on their way to enjoying a baseball match or some sort of sports event. Now, not all of them are as tall as each other. So, in order to help them see the match, we can follow two strategies. We can follow equality, which is giving each one of them the same support, like one box to stand on, or we can treat them differentially. If we give them the same thing, the same box, just one box for each one to stand on in order to be able to see the match, this is what we call equality. However, and as you can see, equality did not solve or does not solve the problem, because, this tall person, in all honesty, he doesn't need any support. He doesn't need any box, because here he can see the match without any support. As you can see, he's tall enough to see the match. The fence does not represent such a huge obstacle for him. And one box solved the problem only for the person in the middle. All right, but for this person, one box is not enough. So equality, which means sameness, giving the same treatment to all the three members, it's obviously not a solution here, because not all of them can see the match. So equity is the solution. Equity is the key. Giving differential treatment does not mean unfairness. It means or injustice. It means actually enabling all to achieve the goal. So giving two boxes to the short one, just one box to the one in the middle because he needs only one box, and nothing at all to this one because he doesn't need it at all. A very similar situation is this one here. Let's imagine that we have an apple tree, and there are 3 apples on the lower branch of the tree, and we have 3 different people. Giving them the same treatment, like one box for all of them, is going to help only one person reach the apple, but the other 2 cannot. So we have to give differential treatment, 1 box only to the tallest person, to the one in the middle who is of average height, and 3 to the shortest guy. This is basically the difference between equality and equity. That's why you should not be confused, because equity refers to fairness, and if our objective is justice and fairness, we should focus on equity and not equality. Equality could refer to fairness. Equality could have the same meaning as equity only in one case. If all the people to whom we are giving the treatment, like education, for example, like classroom, start at the same point. Like if we imagine that the 3 people here who wanted to pick the apple from the tree are all of the same height, so there is no problem if we give all of them the same treatment, like 1 box for each, or 2 boxes, or 3 boxes, depending on how high or how tall each one is. So it's very clear and very obvious that equality is completely different from equity. The second point we'd like to focus on is how ethics interfere or affect or impact these 2 very important concepts. As for the ethic of justice, it's very obvious that it is related and relevant, because when we talk about equality and equity, we are talking about justice and fairness at the end of the day. Justice seems to be like the huge father term or umbrella term for both of them. But they should not be confused. Actually, as I said, there is a very famous quote by Aristotle that can actually show the relationship between justice, equality, and equity. Aristotle once said that we have to treat all equal people equally, or we should treat equals equally and unequals unequally. To treat equals equally, this is equality, like we give the same treatment to the same people in the same way. And to treat unequal people unequally, it's like catering for individual differences, or catering for different people, because people come from different backgrounds, come from different races, ethnologies, faith, some people with ability, certain abilities or certain talents, like people of special needs, people have exceptional needs, people who are actually with disability, like visually impaired, or people who have hearing impairment or mobility impairment. So people are different. So if I give all of them the same treatment, it's not fair. We have to treat unequal people unequally, giving them the treatment that best meets their needs and interests. And of course, the concepts of equity and equality are related to the ethic of care. It's very obvious. But I would say that the concept of equity is closer to care than equality, because in equity we can see teachers, for example, or individuals who listen and care and cater and tailor their teaching methods and their efforts in order to meet the different needs of different individuals. And last, of course, the ethic of profession is related to these two very important concepts of equality and equity. And it's a challenge actually for teachers to keep the balance between caring for the interests of all and the interests of each individual. Should we focus on equality and think of the common interest of the whole group or the whole community, or should we focus only on equity and cater for individual needs, or should we use strategies or approaches that are like a mix of both equality and equity? This is the challenge for professionals working in the field of education. The third point that I'd like to discuss is best practices that reflect or display catering for or taking into consideration the concepts of equality and equity. I think if we want to achieve quality learning and quality education, we have to focus on equity. Because people who come to the classroom, or individuals who come to the classroom, come from a variety of different backgrounds, different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different faiths, different language proficiency abilities. Some people come with disabilities or exceptional abilities. So giving the same treatment is not fair. Let's give a hypothetical example in order to show you how equity solves the problem. Let's imagine that the school provides the learners with their textbooks and also, let's say, 2 copybooks. And the students in a certain school do 5 programs or 5 courses, and they need at least like 10 copybooks or 10 notebooks to take notes in and to do the assignments for each of the courses. Now, if I give 2 notebooks only, or if the school gives 2 notebooks only to all the learners, this is what on surface it appears to be fair. It is actually equality, because some learners are well off and they come from well-off families, rich families, and they actually can have or can provide their children with dozens of copybooks, so they don't need the 2 copybooks. And some families have enough resources only to buy 3 copybooks, and others cannot buy any copybooks or notebooks at all. So in this case, equality does not solve the problem, because rich families or children coming from rich families, they don't need the 2 copybooks. It actually solves the problem only for families that can buy 3 copybooks, because 3 that they can buy plus 2 from the school means 5, and the students are doing 5 courses, so it is okay. So it only solves the problem for a certain number of students coming from certain families with a certain level, a certain socioeconomic level. But of course, children or individuals coming from poor families need more than 2 copybooks. So in this case, we have to give differential treatment, and we have to focus on equity. The same thing should be done in the classroom. For example, I teach English to freshmen at a foundation program, and they come to college with different linguistic backgrounds, because some of them finish their high school in governmental schools, and some of them in English school or British schools, and others in American schools. So they come with different linguistic proficiencies. If we just teach them the same content in the same way, it's not fair. We have to find out, we have to incorporate some strategy to achieve equity. And this strategy, actually, I use it in my own classroom, which is called differentiation or differentiated instruction. I teach the same thing, but I don't teach it in the same way. I try to collect as much information as possible about my students, and I try to personalize the content that I provide to the learners. And if I give us some assessments or some exercise, I give it to all the students. But for those whose linguistic or whose language proficiency is a bit low, I don't give them challenging tasks. Like, for example, I tell them, read the following passage and tell me if the following items are true or false. For much more advanced students whose linguistic proficiency is higher than others, I would tell them, tell me if they are true or false and tell me why. So we incorporate differentiation in order to cater for the different interests and different needs of all the learners. Equity is the key here. The last point that I would like to discuss is a book for children that teaches equality and equity. The book that I would like to talk about is called Peril Power. It's a rhyming. It's a short story or a novel in form of rhyme, written by the British writer Mel Elliott. Most of the stories, of children, even movies, provide children with stereotypes. Like, for example, women are like housewives who stay at home and they work in the kitchen and they help their kids. Men do challenging things like working in the police, in the army, working as doctors, as engineers. And this is actually stereotyping and sort of gender bias. So there is no equality or equity here in the way most traditional child stories or child movies reflect different roles by both men and women. But this story, Peril Power, it's about a 5-year-old called Peril, who for some reason or for an unknown reason, maybe based on the society norms or traditions, talk to her parents about her belief that successful nurses are women and successful doctors are men. And that was a misconcept that the parents discussed with Peril, the hero in the story. And her concepts were corrected. And we discover that all jobs are not related to gender. I mean, a girl can be a successful doctor, can be a successful nurse, can be a president, can be a prime minister. What every and each boy can do successfully can also done successfully by girls. So this story, in an interesting way, teaches children that there is equality and equity among genders. So in this short video, we discussed 4 points. We talked about the difference between equality and equity in terms of definition and how they are confused. We talked about their linguistic analysis or looking at their roots and the roots of other words to show that words that look similar do not necessarily have the same meaning. We also talked about how ethics or different ethics like the ethics of care, profession, and justice interfere or impact these two very important concepts. Talked about best practice in the classroom related to equality and equity. And finally, we talked about the children's book called Peril Power and how it teaches equality and equity among genders. Thank you very much.